Well, that's precisely what we're talking about this morning. You heard the concerns of the CBN governor there telling you about what their concerns are. And you also have seen quite a few of the front pages, in particular Daily Trust newspapers, talking about how Nigerians spend 67.7% of monthly income on utilities. Some people will say those are those fortunate to have jobs and an income to spend as well. But we have some experts in-house this morning to help see how we can bring down the running away rates of inflation and maybe perhaps how Nigerians can cope in this time. We have with us Paul Alaje, who is a senior economist, SPM Professionals, is a fellow Institute of Economists, Nigeria, and also fellow International Management Consultants, International Management Consultants Board in the USA. Mr. Alaje, you're welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. Good morning.
And Professor Ken Ife is a development economist. Prof, you're welcome as well. Thank you for honoring us at every point we call you. Let me ask you first, when you see a headline that says Nigerians spend 67.7% of monthly income on utilities, by utilities they spell it out: electricity, internet data, cooking gas, water supply, phone bill, fueling. These are some of the components that they're referring to. As one who also helps formulate policy and aware of the challenges we currently face, and also coming from our history, the struggles we've had with minimum wage, etc. If, say, a government official were to draw your attention to this, to say, how do we react to this, what would you be advising?
It's very worrying, to say the least, because, as you pointed out, that is for people who are earning salaries. You could say that. How about those who are not earning? So it's very, very worrying. And I know that however you look at it, sure, there are global headwinds that are affecting the situation. There are also insecurity that is also compounding our situation. And there are structural factors at play that makes it so difficult for you to have a simplistic approach to the matter. A very, very complex matter. But I do know that this year we are going to see a lot of action on price stability. So that's the takeoff point.
A lot of action. What sort of action are you
talking about? Monetary policy is going to come down heavily on price stability in this current dispensation. And you can see some signal. For example, when you look at what compounds our problem here of inflation, there's a lot of imported inflation. There's also, because of rising prices and also because of cost of Forex and well, even Paul himself, we're having a chat a minute ago, how much he had to buy dollar to import his machinery. So it's very worrying. But I do know that some of the action we saw at the turn of this year is an orchestrated attack on non-oil revenue, to the extent that CBN said, okay, we're going for $200 billion campaign to raise revenue from foreign non-oil exports, and hope that in the next 3 to 5 years that could be realized. And obviously, if we do get anywhere near that, it could mean a much higher order of reserves, a much more availability of Forex, but it's still a work in progress, and there are many other perspectives to what is being done.
We also know that this is an election year, and oftentimes in an election year, capital flees somewhat. You find a lot of people who had invested initially trying to get their money out as quickly as possible because of political unease. They're not certain what is going to happen. We've seen the agitations within the political parties, and it would seem that consensus is yet to be reached as to even what zone will produce the president. So all of this is also affecting the uncertainty in the market and the economy in general. But you have to ask, do you think that right now those in charge of the economy have time? I know that some people argue that they're usually technocrats. They are not politicians, but we've also seen attempts to drag them into politics. I do not know if you think that they're able to fully concentrate on the economy right now, and if they are, what are some of the signs that you're seeing?
Well, thank you once again. When you say, do they have time? Economic development requires time. If you had asked me this question 2015, my answer would have been yes. If you asked me the same question 2019, with reference to President Buhari's administration, I would say, well, they have to do a lot more. But if you're asking me in 2022...
As I am now.
And you expect me to revamp an economy with inflation about 15.7%, even though my personal experience says my inflation is between 30 to 40%, because the basket of commodity that the National Bureau of Statistics measure is not completely realistic of my consumption. And I know this is the same for many Nigerians. Unemployment 33.1%, not of our population, no, of about 70 million Nigerians. So when we even talk about the headline of people that are employed, which is less than 70% of the labor force, you have over 130 million people that don't even have jobs. Then you now have 33% of 70 million people with jobs, you know, that are having this challenge, because 33.1% they don't have jobs. If you add them to 130 million people, you know that those that are spending 65%, they are kings in a way. So do they have time to change all of these narratives? I doubt, within the context of now to 2023. But you know, the president said something in 2019. And I remember I was in this studio while he was making the speech. One of your reporter asked me a question that president said he wants to leave 100 million people out of poverty in 2019, June 12 to be specific. That what do I think president should do, you know, to leave people out of poverty, and is there time to do that? And I said, yes, right now he could still have some time if his team will work together to ensure we achieve this. So how much of people have we lifted out of poverty? Between 2019, June 12, to 2020, June 12, to 2021, June 12, 2022 is here. How much should we have lifted out of poverty? Recent reports shared by the World Bank is that we might be having over 90 million people living below extreme poverty in 2022. Huge concern. Is there time? I doubt. And I also think that economic think tank should go beyond administration. It should go beyond politics. If we truly want to move them out of political cycle, National Assembly should come with laws that protect those that are going to be helping us to think, you know, if we have a national development plan, which we do, but how much of implementation of the National Development Plan have we seen on one side? On the second side, different administrations have vision. We have seen Vision 2020, we've seen 7-point agenda, all manner of vision. Now, because all of these are not continuous, the visions that we have are not continuous in nature, so we find it very difficult to hold on to something at the end of the day. Rather, what we get is that the political, the democratic government will say, oh, military did a lot of battles, then the second one says, oh, the last administration, and that's what we are having even till now. So I doubt if economic thinkers have enough time between now and 2023 to change Nigeria economy from security concerns, from economic concerns, unemployment concerns, poverty concerns, high inflation, poor exchange rates. I doubt to say that we can do that in a short period of time.
I was listening to Mr. Rwani, you know, shortly after the MPR, the MPC meeting, and he has a term he likes to use, talking about kicking the can down the road. You know, we just keep kicking the problem until we can kick it. I wonder when we'll, you know, I hope we never get to the point where we can kick it no more. But it would seem that there is, as you said, very little that they can do. So it's a case of keep managing the situation. The question is, until when? Until what? What are we waiting to happen before we either pick up the can and throw it off the road, or, you know, do something about the can, maybe recycle it if we want to? What point do we need to get to for us to decide what we want to do with the can? I don't know, but do you get my meaning?
Yeah, I get what you're saying. The thing is, it's all work in progress. There's no magic wand anywhere, because you see, the single commodity, we're a monocultural economy. This is part of the challenge. We're a monocultural economy. And it will take some finite time to diversify the particular source of forex that enters into price stability equation. But on the other side, on the domestic front, the economy is actually well diversified, because if you look at the economy on the domestic side, oil is only 7.49%, 92.5% is non-oil. And then if you look at the non-oil, you will see manufacturing sector kicking at over 10%, you see trade 16%, you see ICT 15%. So you see some diversification in the economy. But we could do more. We could do more, especially at the level of value addition, because we have so much challenges on primary production. And we can come to that, which is why we are struggling to tame inflation, because we are feeding 300 million people, not 200. All the surrounding Francophone countries are depending on Nigeria. And the funny thing is that because of the price differential of our foreign exchange, they are seeing it cheaper to them by about 60%. So they're haggling for the food. And you are going to compete with somebody who is at the frontier or the north, where the food is coming from, and they're taking it. When you're going to compete with somebody who has to pay another 100,000 to move 1 ton of grain from Kano to Lagos. And so it's very, very difficult situation. So, but that doesn't mean that it's intractable. And what is important is that we are working on it. We have noticed that we have gone to primary producers and actually decisively addressed the last mile. The last mile is the man who actually puts the plant who actually produces the food. We've seen how we have concentrated resources to them, to the point that 4.8 million of them have actually got money without collateral. We've seen how we have struggling to rebalance the import of grains like rice and all of that. Is no longer what it was in 2014. Now we are coming up. You can see light at the end of the tunnel. So and then we orchestrated attack now on wheat, because wheat is compounded by this Ukraine, Russia. They are the people supplying the wheat, and now we have more challenges. So all of these are saying something to us that we shouldn't lose hope.
Yeah, someone will say that, even for the agric ministers that saw that, wheat could become a problem for us in future and try to wean us off wheat. Our taste for wheat. I mean, remember cassava bread,
I know.
And the attempt by Mr. Additional to try, and who's now with the AFDB, to try and introduce cassava bread, or substitute wheat with cassava flour. It didn't seem to work. So it would seem that we also carry a certain part of this blame.
You can see that from the import.
I don't think it's blame game.
You don't think so?
I don't think
because if we are learning, yesterday I think on the news it was revealed that our food imports exceeded our food imports exceeded our exports by over 2 trillion naira. Yeah. Food imports, what we consume. So we have to ask, really. And I think that this is also up to women, as it was International Women's Month last month. What exactly are in our kitchens? What are on our tables? What are we serving? What is exactly, maybe restaurants as well, what exactly is constituting this 2.3 trillion which we are importing? What can we do to, because this is some of the questions. Do you think that government has been able to break it down to the level where we understand that some of the choices that we make as individuals, it could be inadvertent. It could be that we don't even understand how all of this affects the general economy. But do you think that we should break it down to that level? It's
important that we break it down to that level. Now, when you look at what we produce, they are raw and crude. We consume a lot of things that are processed. Even though you as an individual, I may not consume, you may not consume. But the truth is, go to our restaurants, go to hotels, go to supermarkets, go to big malls. You see a lot of things that are processed that are not made in Nigeria. What is the limitation? We've seen a lot of industrialists in Nigeria that have ventured into such production. You see, South Korea, China, Indonesia, these are countries that share some attributes with Nigeria at a time. They also practice some of the policies Nigeria is attempting now, and they all failed. One of the policies, let's share money to the people. You've heard Minister of Humanitarian Affairs said, we are going to be sharing average of 22 million Nigeria we collect X, Y, Z. Let me ask you, I'm sorry to ask you as the person that should be asking me a question. We've been sharing money for a long time. What has been the impact? on growth, on inflation, on poverty, on unemployment? Has there been a time with all this money sharing, we have lifted at least 10 million people out of poverty? So why do we continue to do the same thing, expecting that someday we will get a different result? Meanwhile, we have people with modular refineries that we could put that money in their hands as facility, as loans, and ask them to pay back in 5 or 10 years. We have not lost anything. What we have done is that we would have saved our reserve because of pressure on it. That's one. Two, we would have also made some quantity of PMS available, including gas, in Nigeria. That may take 3 years, it may take 4 years, it may take 5 years. But that is when the light you are looking for will come. You see, the challenge is, for our economy, we want to do the first thing last, hoping that God will do it for us. What is the first thing? Factory first. I've not seen any country that has largest population or huge population in an environment and don't get factory rights. Whether you put your gari and you go to cassava, you have to process it. And it's no longer the method of getting a pan and start frying it. Food in the farm cannot be consumed in our mouth directly. He spoke about grain, fantastic. But you need factory to process paddy into finished rice. Either as white rice or brown rice. How do you do that with diesel at 700 naira? And this time last year, it was 300. How do you do that? In Nigeria, no gunshots. Russia did not shoot a gun, bullets to Nigeria. But Nigeria is bearing the brunt. Why? Because what we have in abundance, we refuse to refine it. Factory first. If you don't have factory first, South Korea will not be where it is today. China will not be where it is today. Indonesia will not be where it is today. So Nigeria wants economic miracle, but does not want to give economic sacrifice. And how do you get factory first? Power supply. When the president read his speech in 2019, I said, Mr. President, reduce all this great ambition to one thing or one plus more. What is that in get power stable? Don't give us 5,000 megawatts. Don't give us 13,000 megawatts. With our population, we need nothing less than 50 to 100,000 megawatts. What will we see? Have we been able to shoot up to 7,000 to 10,000 megawatts? I'm not talking of generation. Generation is nonsense. If you generate and you don't transmit, it's nonsense. If you generate, transmit, and you don't distribute, it's nonsense. What is the capacity of our transmission? And we want employment to be there. How we young people work? We said we should go to farm. We did not light up. We dare not be light even on the farms. We have over 200,000 corpers. What are they doing? To go to quote and unquote anti-partnership and primary school to teach? When we have arable land, over 60% of our land arable, what are we doing with them? And you know the good news, corpers will always be available. They are always faithful. But how are we using our resources, including human resource, to farm for us and to make factory available so that we can come out of economic quagmire? We all know these things, that if you don't have power, steady electricity supply, especially to factory, there's just nothing we can do about it. Look at a lot of professionals that we have. They go to UI, they go to ABU, Obafemi Awolowo University, they go to Unilag, all the best schools, private schools that we have. They go to all those places. But when they finish as medical doctors, is our society able to retain them? Isn't that brain drain? Even though some folks will say it's brain circulation. The question is, who is getting the benefit the more? We or those countries? They get them cheap labor, or they pay them, put extra to what Nigeria would have paid, because we are not able to compete in international market. Unfortunately, we are a country. We're a country and we cannot live in isolation. So economic policy must be must be at the forefront of government decision. And there is no policy if you cannot make your factory work.
Let me flip this to my colleagues in Lagos. Gentlemen.
Thank you, Mark. But there's no way you would listen to this conversation and not be stirred up emotionally, listening to just how multifaceted these issues are. It's quite tricky to unpack the issues, all the issues raised by Mr. Elijah. But let me start with one that Prof also talked about, when you were talking about the oil and non-oil sector, saying, there's a drive towards diversification. He talked about what the manufacturing sector is doing, about 10% or thereabouts. But let's come to the basics. I was reading a story this morning about one of the corporate organizations in Nigeria saying it spent 1.5 billion naira on alternative power in just a year. So if we're saying that we want to, diversify, we want to encourage the manufacturing sector, and you looked at the manufacturing sector and it doesn't look like there's any encouragement, why is it that we seem to be saying one thing, but we're not living up to that which we seem to hold dearly or seem to carry around as a mantra?
Well, you want to come to that? Yeah,
yes, that's for Prof, actually.
One thing is that there's no way you can disguise the impact of power as a binding constraint to our productive capacity. It is a binding constraint. In fact, when you look at the website of MAN, 77% of the manufacturers will tell you that their biggest problem is power. If you look at some recent survey that shows that 66% of our manufacturing capacity provide 90% of the power that they use. If you look at the tax burden, you'll find that even though on paper we seem to have the lowest tax, corporate tax, but when you look at implicit tax, we are far the highest in Africa. Because a company will have to produce this power, the country will have to produce their own borehole, their road, everything. So the tax is huge. But having said that, I believe that the issue of power should be taken to the mass market. It's not enough, to continue this story that we are going to do 7,500 megawatts, is going to go to 10,000. It doesn't make much sense, to be honest. Because if you compare Nigeria to South Africa, we are 4 times their population, but they have 58,000 megawatts. So they're actually effectively 40 times bigger than Nigeria in per capita power supply. We have the same population with Brazil. Brazil is delivering 380,000 megawatts, over 1,500% more than Nigeria. That's exactly the same population, the same peer economy. So we need to be at about 100,000 megawatts to actually make sense. Not 4.5, not all these 5,000 we are hearing. So we need to actually get the private sector to do what they can, and part of that challenge is actually being addressed, but I'm not sure how long it's going to take. So, but apart from the issue of power, we also have the issue of transportation. I've just mentioned to you how, as part of the whole price equation, that even though you are producing this food, a lot of it at the frontier, northern frontiers, to bring them down here, it costs you 100,000 naira per ton to even bring them down. And many things that you could have transported in 1 day from Katsina to Lagos 1 day, now it takes 3 days. Part of it is insecurity, part of it costs, so it's also pushing up the price. So not only just look at what happened in the adulterated fuel. Immediately, the price of PMS went up with solid fuel. All of them went up. The next tier was the cars using the fuel to drive. All of them went up. And the third tier is the food that these cars carry. They also went up. So you have 3 layers of price increase just by a little thing that happened on adulterated petrol. It tells you just how crucial that in transport infrastructure and transportation costs also adds to power. And then many other variables come in, which she described as utilities. So it's very tough time for the country. But as I said, we're not doing enough. But we are doing something, but maybe not enough to arrest the situation. Insecurity has challenged us. Look at the figures on capital importation. It's with only less than $700 million of FDI investment this year, the whole of last year. Only less than 700 million. We used to have about 2.8 billion, 2.2 billion. But look at how meager it is. Is it the foreign portfolio investment? You can't put your finger on that because it comes and goes and hits up the forex arena. So where are you going to find the money? I keep saying to people that, well, I did the macroeconomic modeling, looking at prices of oil and then the impact on macroeconomic variables such as inflation and balance of payment and all of that. I looked at all of those, about 7 variables. But we were looking at the figure, and based on $80, keeping the price of a production volume constant, we are looking at the figure go up. Now we are hitting $130 to $120 per barrel. But all of those variables are nowhere to be found. In fact, as CBN sits down for a whole year, NNPC wasn't bringing in the $3 billion it was supposed to be bringing in every month. And when you're not getting that into the pot, how can you have accretion to the reserve? How can you have excess crude? How can you
Prof,
have all
just
these
a quick
parameters
follow-up.
Because they are doing swap. They are doing crude swap with the people who are refining the products.
Right. So a quick issue I want to raise. Pardon me, Prof. Talking about the FDIs and all of that, it's quite ironic because day in, day out, you see foreigners troop into the country, setting up, factories and all of that here and there. In fact, even right here, you've seen Dangote, investing largely at the Lekki free zone and all of that. So it's quite curious. Perhaps that's a conversation we need to have about foreign investment, how it looks like it's lucrative, but on paper, it doesn't say it is lucrative. But I know how many factories I see coming up here and there owned by foreigners. But I want to quickly take you back to something you said in your opening comment. You said there's been a targeted attack on the non-oil sector. You didn't quite explain that one. So I want to understand, what do you mean by a targeted attack, as it were? And who is targeting that sector?
What happened is that, in all this situation, we had to look at supply of forex and also demand for forex. So the area of demand we could handle with demand management, and there are issues around that and some new ideas. But on the supply of forex, the time was ripe for the country to actually look at how do we seriously increase our forex supply. We can see that we can hold on FDI. If foreign portfolio is not coming in as much as we expected, the oil that was giving us over 70%, I've just explained to you how it's not even going into the CBN and within the coffer, so we can't even see it. It's now going on a direct swap, a crude swap, so we can't even see the money. So you can now explain why you are having very high price for crude and you can't see the effect on the economy. Now, the area now left for us to do is to drive non-oil export. So CBN came up with this RT $200 billion, which says in the next 3 to 5 years, we are going to push non-oil export to raise $200 billion a year as revenue. So that's the target. And then it has 5 major subcomponents, components of that strategy. One of them is just to take the item that is already in the marketplace, but it's not giving us the revenue that we need. For example, cocoa. There are 3 countries, Nigeria, Cameroon, Nigeria, Cote d'Ivoire, and Ghana. Between the 3 of us, we are generating 70% of the raw cocoa required in the world, 70%. But when you now look at the cocoa value chain, you see that we don't even get up to 7% of the overall value of the cocoa and chocolate and all of that. So what we needed to do is to incentivize those who are producing the cocoa to add value to them, up to chocolate or whatever, and then conserve before bringing more foreign exchange. So that is the strategy. But there are other crops that we know can come into the frame. So that is the one that phase 2 is taking care of, to bring them into the frame. Things like cassava, we are the #1 in the world. Many products in which Nigeria are #1 in the world. And exportable, you have ginger, you have all that. So we are using the ABP, the Anchor Borrowers Program, to push those products so that they can rise to the level of export.
I haven't quite gotten the attack part.
And then we have other areas. There are 5 different locations. Sorry.
Prof, pardon me. So the attack, the orchestrated attack, which you talked about on that non-oil sector, you haven't quite touched on it, and that's the point I wanted you to make. Who's attacking that non-oil sector, and what can we do to save it?
No, what I'm saying, I'm just describing 2 components of the frontal attack. So it's orchestrated by the central bank, and we have series of incentives, a lot of incentives, even repatriating the money you earn from exporting the material is incentivized. You get as much as $65 naira per dollar coming into the coffers. So it's all graduated and calibrated so that you can get more people. Because the whole thing about private sector is incentive. Private sector responds to incentives. So these incentives are one, whatever money, in fact, I didn't even mention the one that comes before this. We have 100 for 100 PPP, which addresses the first problem. The first problem we have, challenge, is that 80% of the manufacturing capacity we have in this country are dependent on imported raw materials. So when you keep seeing the rising cost of raw materials, and it is part of it is going to the industry. So we cannot say we're going to starve these industries of foreign exchange because they are not using our raw material. No. We created a new vista to say, look, if you want to invest, a company can take up to 5 billion naira loan, but you must guarantee us that not less than 50% of your raw materials are sourced from Nigeria. So you don't leave the old regime, leave them where they are, but focus on a new vista of opportunity. You must have minimum of 50% of our raw material.
Okay.
You must employ no less than 80% of Nigeria. So in that way, you begin to create a new opportunity that will obviously rival the old regime.
The issues that you are raising are most certainly
what I've just described.
My sincere apologies for breaking in. The issues you're raising are quite myriad, but I don't know if Mr. Paul Alaje, who is there with you, also agrees with some of the issues that you have raised, especially concerning the non-oil sector. We'll still come back to the issue, Prof, you were trying to mention about the oil sector itself. But Mr. Alaje, do you agree with Prof on some of the issues that you've raised? We have about 60 seconds to do that.
Well, I agree with Prof on some of the issues, but I also disagree that monetary authority alone can solve some of our problems. You see, central bank has a lot of policies. After different NPR, you see new policies come up. You are talking about repatriating about $200 billion. I want to ask, who can tell what trade policy, because an economy has three legs: fiscal, monetary, and trade. Now, I've not seen trade policy come from either Ministry of Trade and Investment, because trade is not just to buy and sell. And I don't know if people understand that trade is not just buying and selling. We're talking of export, we're talking of import. I've not seen anything in terms of policy like we have been seeing with central bank, drive trade and drive exports. I've not been seeing so much of all of those. Again, fiscal policy is not just to reduce it to paying of salaries and looking at what is in budget, and we expect the difference. You see, central bank is standing on one leg, just as we have power, as I mentioned earlier, generation, transmission, distribution. For our economy to grow, for our economy to be revamped, we also need a fiscal authority, trade authority, and more importantly, monetary authority. But what we have seen in recent time is monetary authority intervening through Anchor Borrowers Program.
Well,
they are intervening in different programs.
Even you seem to be opening, my sincere apologies, Mr. Alaje, even you seem to be opening more and more of these issues that we need to tackle. But the question that I would want to ask you, gentlemen, when we return from this break is, where is the place of national vision in economic development? That and a number of other issues when we return from this break. Please stay with us. Well, thank you for staying with us. Well, Mr. Alaje, you were talking about the three legs on which an economy should stand: fiscal, monetary, and trade. It would seem from what you're saying that there isn't a focus for all of them. We seem to just be developing some of these policies and engineering them, tinkering them on the go. But those who would know would, cast our minds back into time and realize that some of the issues that you are raising date back many years, and we seem to be taking on the challenge on the go, come up with one policy after the other. It's not working now, we evolve it and all of that. So it speaks to whether or not there is a concerted direction that an economy should go. Economies such as the UAE decided that we don't have an economy, let's create one. There are those who would reference the Dubais of this world, the Indias of this world, as the world medical tourism capital, and a number of other places like that. There are those who would reference infrastructure as one of two things that they have to do. And I know, of course, that policies are soft infrastructure. So if we are talking about a direction that Nigeria's economy should focus on, the potential that Nigeria's economy has that we should focus on and channel all of our energies into, which sector will it be for you? And is it one that is active already?
Okay, so thank you so very much. 5 sectors are core, I call them key sectors. The first sector is infrastructure. And infrastructure can be broken down into power first, electricity. We must generate up to 100,000 megawatts. How we are going to do it, either we're going to use private sector, either it's going to be through PPP. Even if you take another country or another investor from outside Nigeria to come help us with 100,000 megawatts, the implication of this is tremendous. Very, very important. That's on one hand. On the second hand, element road and rail. Very, very important. So government attention will be, how do we make business environment good for those that want to invest? So we need to put all of those in place. Again, education. And for me, education should be more of technical education. I've heard so much about China, but I've not heard so much about tertiary education in China. Most of the population in China, the kind of education, and this is also happening now in India, most of the population, the emphasis is not just on university education, but more importantly on technical education. We want to build factory, which of course will be the next thing, because when you look at GDP components, our manufacturing component of GDP must increase to about 60%. I've seen government in and out saying agriculture. Agriculture is good. But like central bank is doing now realize that we need to repatriate money. But central bank needs trade. Central bank needs fiscal authority. Why? Because when you keep exporting your cocoa, it will not make an average person in Osun to be richer. So the farmer in Osun and few other places where we get cocoa from, including Ondo, they will remain poorer until they have factory they can sell to in Nigeria. Those factories will guarantee job, but factory will not work if there is no light. Factory will not be able to transport it to Apapa where they will export if there is no road. More importantly, if there is no security. So an economy cannot be handled in isolation. You cannot be solving power and neglect the rest. You cannot even solve economy without handling security, because they are twins. If you solve security challenges and you say today you want to deal with all the terrorists, and inflation is 15.1% on paper, which is official, unemployment is 33.1%, poverty rates, we have now heard that it may grow to about 90 million people, and you say all the terrorists, all the bandits will be dealt with, but you have 90 million people. In fact, the incubation of insecurity is over 10 million out of school children, and we still let them out of school. And we hope that we're going to solve the problem. If you solve economy, you don't solve security, we are joking. If you solve insecurity problem and you leave economy unsolved, we are still joking.
Okay, Mr. Laje.
We need our best.
Yeah, well,
best
clearly
among us to lead us. So
I've tried to list the five that you talked about. You talked about electricity. You talked about transportation. Yes. You talked about education.
Rail.
Yes, that's transportation.
Education.
Yes, you talked about education, security, and which one is the fifth one?
Yes, health.
Health, okay, thank you. Let me ask
yes.
Prof. I asked the question before we went on air, we went on break the other time, of national vision for our economy to develop. You know, when I hear economic development, I'm asking, what are the yardsticks for economic development? Because, I mean, an organization, a corporate, private, commercial organization, for instance, would say, this is what we're about. This is our motto. This is our vision. This is our tagline. This is what we want to be known for as a nation. And so those ones are there. They're clear. What would be for you a national economic vision? One, that all policies of government, road, transportation, health, education, will target to develop our economy. What should be if you would suggest, if we would go in that direction? I'm asking that against the backdrop of the fact that in the First Republic, it would seem like the regions had a direction for agriculture, all targeting different sectors, and it helped us one way or the other. So what would be for you that national economic target that we should chase after? Is it agriculture or what? Clearly, oil hasn't really helped.
Oh, no, I will take it differently. Look, if you just say one, there are many multiple visions. I mean, I don't want to talk about vision 2010, 2020, 2030, and 2050. The main vision is to diversify the economy itself. Because there are several things that we have. We have a natural economy. We have human capital. We have mineral resources. Natural economy is agriculture, is a base. So, you know, you're not going anywhere because you're already in an agroecological zone, in tropical agriculture. So we're growing the food. You don't even need to plant them. Throw the mango away, they will grow. So it's a natural economy for you. So you have to develop that for you to maintain food security and nutrition. Secondly, you have mineral resources already hiding in the ground. Oil is one, metal are there. They're all there. You cannot ignore them and say, I'd rather go and assemble car as an industry. No, you have to have a vision to ensure that you are also addressing those. We have the oil we are taking out, but we are not actually involved in investing in the midstream and downstream sector of that economy. We only focus on upstream. So we are getting our act right with the PIA and all of that. The solid mineral we haven't done much about, but that needs to come in. We're talking about two sectors. The third sector is what Paul mentioned, infrastructure. Infrastructure, bring the other four he mentioned, they're all under infrastructure, be it road or transport or whatever. It's infrastructure because you cannot, that for you to diversify the economy, you must have infrastructure that is relevant to any sector. When you come to agriculture, the infrastructure that you need, apart from feeder road and all of that, is quality infrastructure. Without quality infrastructure, you can't export your products. And we need to export them to earn foreign exchange and balance our fortunes with oil. So okay. that's our that. Then on human capital development, he also mentioned that you have to focus on many countries don't have any mineral. I mean, tell me what Japan has. Nothing. They only invested in human capacity to become the third biggest economy in the world. Many such countries.
Well, Prof, we asked for one, but you've given us at least two now.
Investment in human capacity.
Right, we asked for one, but you've given us at least two, quite generous. But I'll just quickly ask this before I toss it back to Abuja. And I'm going to try to compress, I think, Mark West's question or the comment she made about, you know, kicking the can down the road. Because, I mean, we have talked about the what we need to do, the kind of vision, the sectors we need to focus on. But we've had, at least under this administration, we can talk about the nation as a whole, but we've had at least 6, 7 years to tinker with a lot of ideas and policies. And I'll take it back to the question, why have we not been able to achieve at least considerable growth? Why does it seem as though we keep kicking the can down the road? When are we going to pick it up and maybe, as Mark said, toss it into the can, recycle it, or do something valuable with it? Why have we not been able to achieve considerable growth?
The reason is the same answer I gave to you. You asked me, mention one. And I said diversifying the economy. That is one, because we have a lot of things going on in the country. But
Prof, why have we not been able to diversify the economy?
No, wait a minute. There are two sectors. We have the external sector. We have the domestic sector. Those two sectors, there are 4 sectors. Those 2 sectors alone, we are sufficiently diversified on the domestic sector. I have told you why. But the success here could not generate any extra foreign exchange. So that's why you need to focus more on productive capacity component of the domestic sector so that they can give you products that you can trade on. We have nothing to trade with except oil. But we have raw materials that we can trade on. You've got to add value to those so that you can enter into the trade equation and then change the fate. But we haven't. And I was also telling you that...
What is the challenge we have there?
The challenge has been pointed out. I mean, a lot of it has been pointed out by Paul, that you've got to have the requisite infrastructure to enable you to punch beyond your weight. In there, we haven't got those infrastructure. We have power is the critical one, transportation is the critical one, and then the underlying, what do you transport if you don't have fuel, and if the fuel is going up? So that needs to be addressed.
But why wait to do that? Because, I mean, I know that, sorry to interrupt you.
Go on.
There is, I mean, we're focusing a lot on oil as a monoproduct, but I know that in recent times there's also been an attempt to try and revive the solid mineral sector.
Correct.
We've seen what is fueling the conflict in Zamfara. We understand that the gold we have there is in such proportions that we now have a lot of foreigners interested in the deposits there. And we know that there is a belt, you know, which is yet to be explored. I understand.
From Elisha all the way to
Osho. Exactly. So if that is the situation, if that is the case, why has it been difficult? If what we're focusing on is primary exports, primary unrefined products, why is it so difficult to also focus on other solid minerals as well?
Well, there are plans, but I haven't seen how much that has gone to invest more in solid minerals. The thing is that when we had the war and they came back from the war, most of the big companies involved in mining left. And we didn't incentivize them to come back. So what you now have is artisanal miners all over the place, creating their own challenges. They are important in their own way. They have to bring regulation. There are many things you can do to migrate them. But the fact of the matter is that the big boys have not come back, and there are reasons which we have not yet addressed for them to make a significant impact. The second one is oil. It is not important in our domestic economy because it has been reduced to 7.59%, 49% of our GDP. But it is critical when it comes to the external economy. The external sector of the economy is contributing over 70% of the revenue. And because we're not getting that from Forex, because we're not getting that, and what we get doesn't come to play in other areas like those who needed to use them to import their machinery and all that, because we're not getting that, then the transmission belt goes all the way to inflation. Because now people can't get the money. 93% of our Forex is under the NAFEX window.
That's why
but there are 7% in the BDC market where speculators are playing, all kinds of players are going there. And my friend had to go there to buy the money to import his equipment. But that is causing so much trouble in the economy, affecting inflation, affecting everything.
Do you think that it should be floated then? I mean, if that's what speculators are doing, and some people say that maybe what they're doing is a reflection of what is also happening on other platforms.
Well, I don't think we should float because of 7%, if the figure is correct. I think, you see, if we float, we are playing with fire. I will tell you why.
I agree with you.
Every 100 naira you spend, you can spend in 4 ways, according to economics. First is to consume when you earn 100 naira. And I want people viewing us now or later, maybe on YouTube, to analyze how they spend each 100 naira of their income. What proportion of your money do you spend on consumption, locally produced goods? 2, which is called marginal propensity to consume. What proportion of your money do you spend on savings, marginal propensity to save, if you have savings at all? 3rd, what proportion of your income do you spend on tax, which is marginal rate of taxation? And lastly, what proportion of your income do you spend on imported commodities, which is marginal propensity to import? And let's assess ourselves, from my tie to my suit, to what we put on, to the TV that people are using in their homes now to watch us, you know, to the shoes that we wear, to so many things that we have in our country. Where do they come from? So when you float, we are a country that wants Anthony Joshua to fight Mr. Macaroni in a boxing context. And then for those that don't know, Mr. Macaroni is a comedian. You know, you want the two of them to fight. You want Nigeria to fight with the rest of the world's economy by not producing so much. Because the component of our production...
Who is the Macaroni and who is the Anthony Joshua?
Anthony Joshua is a boxer. So
I know. In this instance, who will be the Anthony?
So Nigeria is Mr. Macaroni. Because we don't have the capacity to compete. And it's economics. It is just the truth from the analysis of your marginal propensity to import. What do we have? We consume virtually everything. You can look at the recent report of our trade report. What proportion of our import, what proportion is our export? You see, economic is not magic. If you don't fix, now we talk about how do we revamp all of this. You will do practically nothing without power. You will do practically nothing without factory. Look at our young people, even so-called bandits. What is their age bracket? Are they 60s or 70s or 80s? Most of these people are young. You need factory to work. Nigerians are going abroad to work. Where? Wash dishes. And those that work in factory, they work in... We have energy. I've heard Nigerians are lazy, but they are strong. You know, my favorite book says that he that does not... that cannot refine what he catch in a game is lazy. So if you go to the farm or to the bush to catch your game, but you cannot roast it, you are lazy. Nigeria has crude oil, but can we refine it? And if we don't refine it, what is the implication? Pressure on foreign reserve. Exchange will get devaluated. We apply for USD from the central bank for days, for months. For days and for months. No allocation. Where do we get it? And we need equipment to come to Nigeria because our suppliers were writing us. Because of global pressure, they are going to increase the price. Where are we going to get it? Not because you want to spend on consumption, you want to buy pizza, you know, but we want to buy equipment that are now in Nigeria. So how much do you expect us to sell the product when we now get paddy and we refine the food? And how much will we sell? Will we sell it at official rate? That exactly is the problem. So if you get power constant on one hand, and you also make policies that can promote exports, that will help us to have some level of economic balance. Other than that, what we have now will not be enough to take us the current out of current economic quagmire.
You know, I was going to ask, whether you think that the example we're beginning to see from Anambra in terms of what the new governor is bringing on board, what impact that would have. But we're totally out of time, gentlemen. I have to thank you for your interventions this morning. Mr. Paul Alaje is a senior economist at SPM Professionals, is also a fellow of the Institute of Economists here in Nigeria, and also fellow International Management Consultants Board in the United States. And Professor Ken Ife is a development economist. Gentlemen, thank you once again for coming on the program this morning. We'll take a break at this point and we'll be back to also discuss something equally important, bordering on economy and management of state resources. In a moment, please stay with us.